does the way an author writes or shapes a character influence the way that we see them as a reader? What constitutes an antagonist or a protagonist? How do we tell the difference? How does the narrator shape our opinions and understanding about the story we're reading? Am I reading from a script? Yes. These are just some of the questions that I asked myself while reading The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward, a thriller novel published in March of 2021. In the very first sentence of the novel, Ted Bannerman mentions the disappearance of Little Girl with Popsicle and that there is a murderer walking around. Today is the anniversary of Little Girl with Popsicle. It happened by the lake 11 years ago. She was there and then she wasn't. So it's already a bad day when I discover that there is a murderer among us. Later on that same page, Ted's stomach goes into curls at the sight of this little girl on the front page of his newspaper the very same morning. Apparently, Ted had been a suspect for the kidnapping and murder of said little girl with Popsicle. And in my mind, given the strong connection Ted seems to have with Little Girl with Popsicle, the two were intrinsically linked from the start, but in an incriminating way for Ted. Once something worms into your head, it's hard to get it out. And no, I don't have the book with me because I rented it from the library and then I forgot to give it back on its due date, and then it was overdue, and then I was too scared to rent it again. Thank you. As the reader continues the story, it follows the life of Ted Bannerman, his daughter Lauren, and his religious cat Olivia. Throughout the first 40 pages, the chapter perspectives go from Ted to Olivia, and both of their chapters are always written in first-person perspective. Occasionally, it's in italics when the character is recording something on the tape recorder that Ted has. Ted Bannerman himself is full of mystery from the beginning. He is very choosy about what he lets the reader know. We know that he has a daughter named Lauren that only comes around every few days and then, quote, goes away to an undetermined location, and his cat Olivia, who doesn't like to be in the same room as Lauren. As a child, we know that Ted loved his mother and loved animals. We know that Ted has boarded up all the windows in his house on his street. We know he goes to the forest at night occasionally. Nothing weird about that. We know that he may be an alcoholic. We know he makes questionable cooking choices. We know he sometimes doesn't feel any pain. We know Ted has some mental health issues and sees a kind of therapist person that Ted calls the bug man that gives him medicine to help keep his mental health in check. And we know that Ted knows who the little girl with Popsicle is. Olivia is Ted's cat, as I mentioned before. She walks around with fresh eyes as her chapters come up, giving us a new perspective of the house from the ground. She's very religious, as I explained earlier as well. She loves God, she loves the Bible, likes another girl cat that she sees outside the window occasionally, and is very critical of Ted's behavior when he is drunk. Lauren is Ted's preteen daughter. And I got this age range basically from context clues within the book. She's old enough to ride a bike, old enough to know the capitals of countries, old enough to go to the mall for some new clothes as a treat. It's never really mentioned how old she is. I think she's just pre-teenage. She is either tolerant or super violent towards Ted, whom she calls Ted and occasionally Dad. And immediately, as many other readers most likely did, I instantly related Laura. Her name is Lauren. Sorry, Lauren. A lot of L names in this book. I instantly related Lauren, Ted's preteen daughter, to Lulu, who we find out is the name of Little Girl with Popsicle. And Lauren is the only one we don't get a chapter with her perspective until near the end of the story, when at this point I was fully expecting Lauren to be Lulu or Little Girl with Popsicle. Who these three individual characters are Gets a little more convoluted and complex as we go throughout the novel, but we will get more into that later. Then in a sea of first-person perspective on page 39, we get a chapter entitled D, D-E-E. D, as we find out, is the big sister of Lulu, who is, as I mentioned, little girl with popsicle. These chapters are the only ones in third-person limited omniscient, also called close third. D is strong-willed, hard-headed, determined, stricken with grief, and has been through a lot in her life. Her purpose in the novel is to find her sister, or find out who took her. The narrator tells us the story of how her sister went missing at the lake 11 years ago. When Lulu got on Dee's nerves about a boy she liked at school, Lulu tried to show her a pretty pebble she found. Dee went off to the water without another word to her sister and was surrounded by snakes, which was very traumatic for her, when she met that older boy who stood her up at the line for ice cream when she went to the bathroom to ask for sanitary napkins. Pads. When she came back to find her parents searching frantically for her sister, who was nowhere to be found at the time, they never saw Lulu again. The last thing Lulu said to Dee was, "I found a pretty pebble." Some days, all Dee can think about is that pebble. What did it look like? Was it smooth or rough, gray or black? Was it sharp and angular, or did it fill Lulu's small palm with its round weight? Dee will never know, because she got up and walked away without a glance. After Dee's chapter, we dive right back into Ted, and Ted's got a weekend place he keeps talking about, and wants to make friends so that someone can be there for Lauren and Olivia while he's away. We don't know what the weekend place is at this point, but he creates a dating profile, which he uses to, for the lack of a better term, catfish women into meeting him. There are instances that he doesn't talk about. For instance, at the mall, or the thing with the mouse. Both Ted and Lauren seem to be missing chunks of their hair. Ted says that Lauren tears his hair out, and other times he says that Olivia does it. It's just a lot of confusion with Ted, a lot of mystery. Meanwhile, the story continues with Dee living with the loss of her sister, her mother, and her father. Understandably, she's seeking answers for who abducted her sister and basically ruined her life. She forces herself to believe that Lulu is still alive. She knows Ted, knows that he is or was a suspect in her sister's case, so she moves into the vacant house next door to him on Needless Street. While living there, Dee spies on Ted. She has a stray cat living with her in her house, which may or may not have been the cat that Olivia saw outside and liked. I still haven't made that connection yet. Anyway, so she has a stray cat living with her in the house. She continues to act normal around Ted despite really knowing who he is, and even gets an invitation to go out on a date with him, which she never shows up for. After this, he begins to be a little suspicious of her. He goes away in his truck as often as he can, and then she hears a little girl's voice in Ted's house. Just to put this in perspective, at this point in the novel, I, at least, and I'm assuming that other readers, are thinking of Ted being Lulu's kidnapper at this point. So we are thinking just as Dee is, who is supposed to be that reliable perspective in the story. She even gives the reader a little slowdown warning in the same moment that she gives herself that warning. Relief and horror flood her, so strong she can taste them in her mouth like mud and water. Her worst fear and her best hope are confirmed. There is a child in that house who does not leave. That's all you know right now, she tells herself sternly. Step by step, Dee. But she cannot help it. Lauren, she thinks. Lulu, her given name, which is Laura. Lulu, Laura, Lauren. Such close sounds, lying almost atop one another. To Dee, in that moment, the singing girl sounds exactly like her sister. The timbre, the little catch in her voice. Then one day, Dee breaks into Ted's house while he's away, looking for Lulu. She doesn't find anyone, not even his cat, and she leaves feeling discouraged. After this, we find out about the mall incident with Lauren, where Ted took her to the mall to try on some new clothes. She tried on some pants and then somehow wrote on them that Ted had kidnapped her and delivered the pants to the sales associate. We also learn about the mouse incident, where Ted had a class pet mouse that he killed, and his mother had to talk about He may want to hurt things because it runs in the family. Cheery. And then we get a scene in which Lauren and Olivia actually speak to each other. Olivia is in the house while Ted is asleep on the couch with monster trucks playing on the TV, because that's his favorite thing to watch, and listening to his record player, when Olivia hears Lauren actually speaking to her. She follows the sound and realizes Lauren is actually in the freezer. It's unplugged and it's got holes poked into it, but she's in the freezer, and the freezer has like a bunch of weights on it, so she can't get out. Lauren and Olivia talk for a little bit, Olivia being shocked that Lauren can understand her since Ted can't. And she's a cat, so she's like speaking cat or something. And Lauren divulges that she has been a prisoner of Ted's, as the reader thought all along. I was like, yes, I was right. So the two kind of work together on a plan to get Lauren out of the freezer. And the first time we actually get a chapter from Lauren is, and on her perspective, is on page 193, in which she records a little bit for the tape recorder, claiming that Ted kidnapped her. And then we dive right back into Olivia's chapter. I look at the freezer, its size. I look at the air holes Ted pierced in the lid for me. Or were they for me? I feel the answer ebbing through the thick metal door, the rubber seal. The knowledge twists through my organs, flesh and bones. You don't go anywhere when you go away, I say. You stay right here. When you can't get in, that means I'm here, she says. We take turns, I guess. Oh, how could he, I say, to lock up his own daughter like this? She gives a tired little laugh. Grow up, Olivia. I'm not his daughter. But you call him Dad. He calls me kitten when I'm good. Does that mean I'm a cat? I shudder and my tail lashes. He calls me kitten, I say. I know, she says. There have been lots of kittens over the years. So with this knowledge that Lauren is Ted's prisoner and Olivia can understand Lauren and Lauren can understand Olivia. A few days later, when Ted is distracted once more, Lauren tells Olivia to do what she can to get her out of the freezer. So the two work together to get the freezer door open as quietly as they can. But when Olivia looks into the freezer, she doesn't find anything. There's nothing in there. All the while, Lauren is still talking to Olivia and telling her the truth, that Olivia is a part of Lauren. Olivia, or the idea of her, was born from Lauren, which helps her cope with the trauma of being kidnapped and tortured by Ted. When Lauren doesn't want to be hurt, Olivia comes in and takes it for her. That's why they can't ever be in the same room together, and they've never been seen in the same room together. I open my eyes. The freezer lies open, a dark grave. I stand on two hind legs and peer into the depths. It is empty. Ooh-wee, goes the whine. Where are you? I whisper. Something is very badly wrong. The whining in my head rises to a scream, and I row and claw my head. I want to run headfirst into a wall just to make it stop. Hey, cat, Lauren says next to my ear. The screaming rises, though I can hear my breath, my heart chopping like an axe on a block. Olivia, she says, try not to freak out. I was never in there, she says. I can feel her somehow, the warm outline of her, or smell her maybe. Feels like you're inside me. It's the other way around, Olivia, she says. You're inside me. The mind is clever. It knows how to tell you something that you can accept when life gets too hard. The man who calls you kitten keeps you prisoner. Why, your mind might tell you that you are a kitten. It might make up a story about a stormy night and how he saved you. But you weren't born in the forest. You were born inside me. Okay, at this point in the video, I'd like to take a little intermission and mention all the ways in which Ward hints to the reader that Olivia and Lauren might actually be part of the same entity, or at least are perceived by others that way. Because I kind of got those hints throughout the story, and this chapter just kind of solidified it for me. For instance, we already know Ted calls both of them kitten. Here are a couple examples that I'll just like put up while I'm reading these. The second one is Lulu's mind reading a few pages prior. So I wish I had the book, because there's a page in which at the beginning during Dee's chapter where she's telling the story of the day that Lulu disappeared, and they're playing this mind reading game where they try to guess what each other is like saying or thinking. I wish I had the page number for that, and I wish that I had the quote, but I don't. A few pages after that example, on page 58, was this quote that came from Olivia, which I thought it was like a clever connection. Sorry. I thought it was a clever connection, although, it was Lulu rather than Lauren. But at this point, I'm thinking they're the same person, so it was connecting for me. The third thing that kind of solidified this idea was the hair pulling. As I mentioned earlier, Ted sometimes talks about Olivia like scratching out his hair, or Lauren's like new thing is her like ripping out hair. He's kind of like going bald. And then there's also times where he kind of tells Lauren to stop pulling her own hair, which I thought was interesting. And then finally, kind of a more or a less subtle hint, I guess, is from the bug man himself, or Ted's therapist. Here's the quote. He just kind of relates Olivia and Lauren pretty easily, or he says you depersonalize your daughter by thinking of her as a cat, or like attributing her feelings to the cat instead of her, which I thought was interesting. But despite all of these hints, we still don't know the full truth of what exactly is binding the two together, other than the fact that Lauren needs Olivia to cope with the trauma that she's experiencing. So here are a few things that we as the readers are made to believe from Ward's storytelling so far in the story. 1, we know that Lulu disappeared 11 years ago. She's the girl with Popsicle. 2, we are made to believe that Ted kidnapped Lauren at this point. 3, we tend to believe that Lauren is Lulu, or girl with Popsicle. 4, Lauren is Olivia, or at least that Olivia is a part of Lauren that protects her. 5 is that Dee thinks that Lauren is Lulu and has heard her voice in the house. Number 6, I haven't really touched on the Green Boys yet in this essay. I don't remember if I do, but there are what Ted refers to as green boys in the attic of Ted's house who live there. Although when Dee breaks into his house, she doesn't see an attic. There are green boys who live in the attic, according to Ted. Number 7, Ted may or may not have an Oedipus complex, but we won't talk about that. So these are all the things that we, at this point, are meant to believe. Okay, so continuing with the storyline, for the next couple of chapters, Lauren tries helping Olivia come to grips with the fact that she is a part of Lauren. Then one day a demolition company comes out and goes into the woods where Ted frequents at night, which is totally normal and perfect and a great thing to do. We also know that that's where Ted's gods are buried, as he calls them gods, and he kind of freaks out when he sees the demo company go in there. So he goes out there one night with what we presume as Lauren in his backpack. She thinks she sees Lauren in his backpack. So he is going into the forest to go dig up his gods and move them somewhere else. Dee gets it in her head that he is going to bury Lauren, and so do Olivia and Lauren. In this part of the story, we're kind of getting all of the perspectives. Lauren and Olivia kind of talking each other down, kind of freaking out that they're in a backpack, and Ted just completely hell-bent on going into the forest and picking up his gods. And then Dee saying, I have to go save my sister because I know that she's in his backpack. So Dee follows him out into the woods, but she runs into a snake and gets bitten by the snake. And as you'll remember, or as I hope you'll remember from earlier, in the story that she tells the reader, or that the narrator tells the reader on her behalf in her chapter at the beginning of the book, she kind of gets ambushed by like this group of snakes at the lake the day that Lulu went missing. So this is kind of, I wrote down that it's incredible irony, considering her first excuse for not being able to save Lulu was because she was surrounded by snakes in the water at the lake. I'm not sure if that's irony now, and not sure why I wrote it with such contempt. Wow, and that's her excuse for not saving Lulu. That's so lame. This is like the second time that she has encounters of the snake kind in her story. So she does get bit by the snake in the forest, but she's still determined to help who she thinks is her little sister. So she trudges on through the woods towards Ted, and to her surprise, she finds Ted stabbed in the chest alone, and she kind of kneels down next to him, and he's like crying out for help, and she's like, I'm gonna watch you die. And as Ted lies there kind of gasping for air on the ground, Dee calls him a monster and screams out for Lulu. And then we get a bombshell, if you will. He's not a monster, the girl's voice says. Bleh. I'm starting over. He's not a monster, the girl's voice says, coming reedy and weak through Ted's blue lips. It is the same voice that was recorded on the cassette tape. I had to kill him, but that's between Daddy and me. I think it's important to remember that Dee is also like succumbing to a snake's venom at this point, so she's not in her best state. Couple the venom running through her veins, she just like can't understand what's happening. Dee runs off to find Lulu. She's still convinced that Lulu is somewhere out there and that she has to save her sister. So she leaves Ted to die on the forest floor, and then she starts seeing things. So for example, as she's kind of running through the woods trying to find Lulu, she sees the policewoman who was leading the investigation for Lulu's disappearance 11 years ago. And so that policewoman pops up and demands that Dee tells the truth about what really happened the day that Lulu went missing, which was a huge perspective shift for me, because the minute I knew that there was some falsehood about Dee's story, my trust was completely gone. I was like, oh, you lied to me? How could you do that to me?
The reader.
But it was a really interesting shift. So from pages 272 to 280, we get a recounting of the real events of what actually happened the day that Lulu went missing. And it's still in that close third perspective, but there are a few changes to Dee's story. So for instance, Lulu trails along with Dee to the lake, which didn't happen before. It was just that Lulu had that pretty pebble and Dee was upset with her, so she left without her sister. But in this version of the story, Lulu follows Dee to the lake and they meet a boy and agree to go get ice cream with him. And this part, okay, I just don't remember if this is exactly the way it went, so please correct me if I'm wrong. They get ice cream, I believe I remember, and then afterwards they go to kind of an excluded area in the woods next to the lake, where Dee thinks this will be her first sexual encounter with the boy. Lulu goes to the water's edge. She leaves Dee and the boy in the forest, and I think they like start kissing or something, and then Dee hears this loud she hears like a banging noise. She goes through the trees and she finds Lulu bleeding with like her head bashed in on the rocks, I believe. The boy pieces out. Dee panics and thinks that she can save her sister. At this point I was like, I don't know. So then she goes into the water, and I think that's where she sees the snakes. The snakes were real. And I know that she saw them in that truthful telling. They were there in the lake at some point. But she tries looking for her parents, and I think from what I remember, she thinks they're like miles away from the lake. It turns out they were right next to where her parents were. But she tries looking for her parents. She can't find them. And by the time she gets back to the shore, Lulu's body is gone. Dust billows and dances in the air as if recently kicked up by tires. Dee thinks she glimpses a car bumper vanishing down the track. The roaring in Dee's ears almost drowns the engine. Her ragged screams for the driver to stop and let her sister go. But the car is gone. At Dee's feet in the dust lies a deep green stone, a perfect oval, shot through with veins of white. So now the reader truly knows what happened to Lulu. Is that she most likely, what I gathered was that she died on the shore, and then someone grabbed her body. So then we go back to Dee in the forest, and she dies there. Spoiler alert, I'm sorry. Dee dies in the forest. The snake poison spreads its way throughout her body, and she's like chasing after who she thinks is Lulu, making plans for their future together now that she's finally found her. It's pretty heartbreaking, because obviously Lulu isn't there, but Dee 100% sees her. And it's kind of, like I said, it is heartbreaking, but it's kind of beautifully written in her last couple moments and just the last mentions of her in the book. As her vision clouds to black and her heart slows, she thinks she feels the lightest touch on her head. She seems to catch the scent of sunscreen, warm hair, sugar. Lulu, she tries to say, I'm sorry. But her heart stops beating and Dee is gone. The thing that was once Dee lies far from any trail. The can of yellow spray paint is still held in what was her hand, swollen black with venom. The birds and the foxes come, the coyotes, bears, and rats. What was Dee feeds the earth. Her scattered bones sink into the rich, changing humus. No ghost walks under the spreading trees. What's done is done. And then the last bits of the chapter where Ted is dying on the forest floor read as follows. He is bleeding from the mouth, a thin line of red. The words are slurred, but I know him well, so I understand. Listen to them, he says. All around in the dawn, the birds are singing in the trees. The cord is white and soft, glowing. It connects the three of us, heart to heart. And I should have prefaced that by saying that that was in the perspective of Olivia in the forest. However, it is not the end for Ted. A neighbor named Rob finds him lying there on the forest floor and takes him to the hospital where we find out that Ted was abused himself. And this is also a spot where the story started to change again for me. Ted was, perhaps for the first time in the novel, transforming into a sympathetic character. Knowing Ted's past, obviously, was a big catalyst for his character kind of flipping. So in this part of the story, we find out that Ted's mother was abusing many children in the hospital she worked at, and that she was abusive towards Ted himself. As more details are revealed about Ted's childhood and what he went through at the hands of his mother, that trust, like I mentioned, kind of shifts in his favor. I really enjoyed in the hospital, a doctor tells Ted that the abuse was not his fault. Somebody should have caught this. Somebody should have stopped what was being done to you, which is just true of all types of abuse. In a chapter in Lauren's first person perspective, we get details about what mommy did. Why did I say that like a robot? What mommy did to Ted as a kid, and why he is missing hair on his head, why he has a bunch of burnt bald spots on his head, and then how Lauren was born from that. Ted knew that mommy was right. This only got worse if he fought it. He knew if he stepped out of line, mommy would put him in the old chest freezer in the disinfecting bath of vinegar and hot water. So Ted tried to let it happen. He tried to be a good boy, but the pain and the noises got so bad. I understand something about life that Ted never has. It is too painful. No one can take so much unhappiness. Later on in that same chapter, I believe, about a page after that last one, mommy's crimes are revealed. And then finally, Ted's first person perspective reveals how his mother killed herself and demanded Ted to bury her in the woods outside of the house. And then on top of all this, Ted finds out that the bug man was never a real therapist and was giving him the wrong medicine. I still don't know what this is about. I've thought about this for months. If anyone knows what the hell that was about, let me know. And then we kind of continue the story with Ted and Rob, the neighbor who found him dying on the forest floor. They're happy with each other. They're happy hanging around each other. They love each other. And then they visit the site of Lulu's death to pay respects to her. It's far from the end of the story. And in a way, it's kind of the beginning of like an even more tangled web of events and revealed truths. Okay, I have to open this next section up with a sort of disclaimer that this is all just my brain working to put the clues together. None of this is really ever explicitly confirmed in the book, but with that being said, there was something else. I knew that there had to be something else. Like, yes, okay, Olivia and Lauren were identities that Ted used to help himself cope with his own childhood trauma, and maybe he couldn't come to grips with that earlier on in the book, so kind of fabricated this story that he kidnapped Lauren and that Lauren had Olivia as a part of her to help her cope with the trauma that Ted was inflicting on her. But there was something off about Dee. Literally, while I was writing the script, something clicked in my brain. All right, here's what we know about Dee. Okay, she's always alone. Yeah, we never see her with other neighbors other than Ted. Her story changes, as I mentioned earlier, as if it's being made up, or she's omitting other things, like she's lying to us, which is fucked up. I don't know why I said that. I'm sorry. Or, she's covering something up to keep herself protected from the real trauma, as is a huge theme in this book, as we know. Ted also has things of hers that we associate with her or with Lulu, i.e. the white flip-flop. So the white flip-flop is Lulu's, and Dee's story, something that I didn't include earlier, but that I think is equally as important. Dee's story included like when, Dee's story about Lulu included the fact that when Dee went to the shore to check on Lulu, and her body was gone, there was one white flip-flop left remaining on the shore. And Dee was too afraid to tell her parents anything about what happened. So she like took the flip-flop, went to the bathroom, and slipped the flip-flop into someone's bag. Okay, so with that knowledge, we have this quote on 298 from, I think this is from Lauren's perspective, but talking about Ted. Mommy kept interesting things in her drawers. An old songbook with bears on the front. A single white child's flip-flop. I kind of said that like it was a white child's shoe, like a child who was white, her flip-flop, but it's like a white flip-flop that belonged to a child. She's probably white too anyway, but
whatever.
More things that are different about Dee than any other character. Her chapters are all in third-person, limited, omniscient perspective rather than first person like everyone else is. There is a reason for that, which I'll get into later, or a proposed reason, I guess. She knows things that only Ted knows. When Dee dies, she is just given to the earth like one of the gods, whom at this point we don't know. No one finds her. I also find it interesting that she dies right before Ted is about to. And the hint that something is wrong with Dee, in my opinion, is even in the title. Ted's house is the last house on Needless Street. That means that there's no house next to his. Like I think he has a next door neighbor, which is the Chihuahua lady. Should I give context to that? I'm not going to. But the other side of his house, there's no other house, I believe. Dee should never have been there because there's no house there. Ted's house is the last house on Needless Street. So throughout the story, we're given very subtle hints connecting Ted and Dee. Almost always in similarities between specific word choice is something that I picked up on. I don't know if this is purposeful, but here are a few things that caught my eye about Dee and Ted being similar or connected in some way based on word choice. Special coffee being used to describe alcohol, or at least something that is not just coffee. Tracing on baking paper. Second one, I didn't write down because I didn't think it was important at first when I had the book in my hand, but I don't know the page number for this. I found this quote like on a forum online or something. I like looked it up because it was driving me crazy. So if you know the page number, let me know because I don't know it. But I know that these are two examples. And then finally, just like some very specific word choice similarities as Ted lies dying and as Dee is active. Well, as both of them are basically actively dying, but Dee has not expired yet. Just the use of the word baying. I don't know if it's just like, it's just uncommon enough for me personally for me to pick it out. They're very odd words to be using like more than once. And listen, okay, yes, these could very well be coincidences. Everything is really speculative until the end. Dee is dead. Ted has been rescued by Rob from the forest, and they are in the place that Lulu died and was abducted. And then this happens. There is something bright on the rain-spattered trail. I bend to pick it up. A long oval shape, rounded and smooth to the touch. It is green as moss, shot through with veins of white. Look, I say, what a pretty pebble. I turn to show Rob. As I do, the ground suddenly gives way beneath my foot with a graceful slide. I fall, striking the earth hard. Something tears inside me. It is like being killed again. And then farther down this page, Ted hears a voice inside his head. And it says, I put it in our pocket, he says to me, clear and young. Little Teddy, in our pocket, but you threw it in the trash. Yo, what? I literally have not stopped thinking about this section since I read it in November of 2022. First of all, right, We get a description of the pebble. Y'all remember the pebble? The green pebble. What a pretty pebble, Lulu says to Dee. Okay, we get a description of the pebble down to some of the same words that Dee used on page 49. The white veins shooting through. Okay. And then Ted himself actually says, what a pretty pebble. Like, I don't know. It's just like, it's too similar to be coincidental. And then, second of all, what happened after that? What was that? Tripping and then dying again? Being killed again? Okay. I'm like going through an existential crisis as I'm saying this. My point is, there are too many similarities in this section alone. How does Ted say exactly what Lulu said to Dee Dee the day that she died? What a pretty pebble. How does Ted know about what Lulu said when she was abducted if Dee was not a part of him in the first place? Or if Ted is not a version of Lulu that she made up to help herself cope? Okay, listen, I'm just speculating here, but Ted plus Dee, Ted D. Teddy. Ted's childhood nickname. Is that a coincidence? I don't know.
Let's keep reading.
Okay, after this absolute banger of a section, Lauren reveals that Mommy was the one who abducted Lulu that day. Snatched her body right up from the lake. She was the car that Dee saw scream off into the distance. That's why she has Lulu's white flip-flop, the other white flip-flop. And on page 318, Ted or Lauren sees Mommy bury Lulu's body in the next door neighbor's backyard, in the Chihuahua lady's backyard. There's a little context for you. Not enough to know what I'm talking about, but enough to be intrigued. Lauren describes trying to make Ted see the truth of what his mother did to Lulu so many years ago. I took him back to the yellow house with the green trim again and again, but he still didn't get it. I think he always knew somewhere deep down that it was Mommy. So plot twist number 17, Ted's mother is the culprit. I gotta say, I still found myself going back to that passage on page 315. So I'm trying to make sense of this passage on 315, right? Ted picks up the green pebble. It's like being killed again. And that could just mean that it's similar to the experience that he felt when he was dying on the forest floor, right? But they are in the exact same spot where Lulu died. And to me, this at least signaled that Lulu and Ted were intertwined. How did Ted know where Lulu died? Dee didn't say anything. In Dee's narrator story, she doesn't tell us where it happens first. She certainly didn't tell the police that. Was this common? I don't think this was common knowledge, that people knew about the true story about what happened to Lulu. I think Dee told the authorities that she didn't see her sister all day, basically. So how did Ted know? How did Ted know where Lulu died? And then little Teddy came out and spoke to Ted. He said, I put it in our pocket, but you threw it in the trash. The pebble, Lulu's pebble, in Ted's pocket. Was Ted also Lulu? Or did Lulu need Ted to keep her sane after what happened to her? But she died, right? Was Lulu a piece of little Teddy that he needed to cope with another death? With his own? Was he there the day Lulu died? Trying to kiss Dee in the forest? Was he the boy? Was he trying to distract her as her mother killed and abducted Lulu? Was Dee even real in the first place? Was it all Ted? Was Ted ever real? All right, the point of all this is not to confuse you, and I'm sure that's not what Ward wanted when she wrote this novel either. I still haven't fully, as you can see, cracked the code to this book, and I've thought about it nearly every day. Catriona Ward is an exceptional writer, in my opinion. She's detailed and calculated with seemingly every word she puts on the page. Everything seems intentional. She allows the reader to kind of go in and out of opinions as the events shift, as we learn more about characters. So maybe that's where my need to find a concrete answer comes from. At its core, the story is about the effects of trauma on a child's psyche. What started out as a thriller novel transformed into an exploration into mental health and how the things that happen to us when we're kids can shape, and often does shape, who we become. Ted, as we understand him, has dissociative identity disorder. The pain and trauma and abuse he suffered as a child from his mother settled its way inside of him, and Olivia and Lauren were born inside of him to protect him. Whether Dee was a part of that or not, or whether she was even real, she had trauma too. Trauma that she disguised in a false narrative to protect someone. And while Ward makes it really easy to follow along with the events that happen in the story, her characters are complex and multidimensional, and allows the reader to go down many different paths looking for one singular answer when there just may not be one. And that's also pretty accurate to childhood trauma. In many situations, a child experiencing abuse may grow up and ask themselves why this happened, think about it over and over again, and try to deduce how they could have made the situation different when it was never their fault or responsibility in the first place. Like the doctor told Ted on page 286, somebody should have caught this. Somebody should have stopped what was being done to you, and it shouldn't have had to be Ted himself. Studies have also shown that childhood trauma can affect many different parts of a person's life, including memory. And when I say studies, I mean like tons. The first one that I could find that didn't require me to pay was a study from 2009, so keep that in mind, but it's called Child Maltreatment and Memory by Jody A. Quaz of the Department of Psychology and Social Behavior of the University of California in Irvine, California. The other authors are Gail S. Goodman and Kristen M. Ogle of the Department of Psychology at the University of California in Davis, California, in which the study states, finally, children with maltreatment histories seem to remember trauma-related information particularly well, although those with stronger dissociative tendencies and more severe trauma symptoms, who often have more intense physiological reactions during stressful events, probably reflecting inadequate emotion regulation strategies, make more memory errors than do other maltreated children. A controversial topic has been adults' memory for childhood abuse, particularly sexual abuse. 3 issues have received considerable attention in research on eyewitness memory accuracy among adults who as children were maltreated. One issue is the degree to which adults can completely forget childhood traumas, such as sexual abuse, by using a repressive coping strategy. Why I'm bringing this up is because I think it might have been intentional for Ward to leave the waters a little muddy, or at least whether she meant that or not, I picked up on it. What I'm saying is that my confusion in the characters of the story, as well as the events of the story itself, reflect that same memory loss that victims of childhood trauma experience. Perhaps the reader cannot truly know everything because Ted himself does not know everything because of his trauma. And I guess that's not really what matters, because in the end, for Ted, there is closure and healing and retribution without judgment, and perhaps the reader comes away with more sympathy than they originally sat down with. And we wouldn't have any of this without the way Ward used perspective to trick the reader. And I'm not meaning trick as in with malintent. It's just, it starts out as a thriller novel, and we come away with something a lot different because of the way that she uses perspective. Ted, a character with an obvious mental disorder whose story is told in first person, has unreliable thoughts to the reader because they're so mysterious and seemingly untrustworthy, because that's what Ward gives us from the very beginning. She plants that seed in our mind that we should be wary of this character. We shouldn't trust this character. There's something off about him. We don't trust him. It also doesn't help that it's been hammered into us since the beginning that Ted might have, but most definitely kidnapped a little girl. Dee, on the other hand, although she is in close third perspective, seems more level-headed, perhaps because we have an objective outsider's view when she is telling the story. She's just out to avenge her little sister's death and bring some justice for her own closure. Although she is in third person, we tend to trust her more because Ward makes her motives quote-unquote noble in our eyes. And I am suspicious of Ted to begin with and want to see him get his appropriate justice for kidnapping Dee's little sister. And I believe that Ward does this intentionally so that we can all be surprised surprised at the end when Ted really hasn't kidnapped anyone and in fact is just trying to deal with the trauma from his own childhood abuse. Hi, I'm in a different place now. I would love nothing more than Catriona Ward. I think I said Catriona Ward earlier, and I'm so sorry. It's Catriona. It's not Katarina. I would love nothing more than the author to find this video and just shut me down in the comments and tell me exactly where I went wrong, tell me exactly what she was doing when she wrote this, how she came to write this novel. Sorry, my cat is eating. But I doubt that Catriona is even gonna know this video exists. I don't think she's gonna comment on it. I'm so sorry. I wish she would. So for now, I am going to overanalyze the hell out of this piece of literature. I'm gonna believe what I feel and what I see in the novel because I believe that that's the essence of art, and call it good. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it if you made it all the way to the end. Of course, if you disagree with me, if you agree with me, if you have other ideas about what this story could mean. But yeah, thanks for watching and let me know your thoughts in the comments below.